Hello and welcome back to the NTT Global Data Centers facility tour on the Cloud and Hybrid channel. I'm Emma Brookes, Head of Channels at DCD, and I'm delighted to introduce this episode on London calling, power, performance and sustainability. And thank you, of course, to NTT Global Data Centers for partnering with us on this episode and this broadcast. So with me here today, I'm delighted to be joined by Tom McKnight, who is the Regional Operations Director at NTT Global Data Centers. So thanks very much for joining me today, Tom. How are you?
Very good. Yeah, thank you.
Great. Thank you. And John Rumsey, who is the Senior Director of Site Selection and Investment for NTT Global Data Centers as well. So thanks very much for joining me, John. How are you doing?
Very well, thank you, and thanks for having us on.
No, thank you very much for joining me. So, getting us sort of right into it, Tom, if I could maybe go to you first, as an introduction, please tell me more about NTT Global Data Centers London facilities. What makes them unique, and how are you fulfilling customer needs in this key market?
Okay, so NTT in the London area, we've got a number of data centres around the M25. We've got Slough, Hemel Hempstead, and now we've got this new data centre in Dagenham, which we've just brought online. So we've got it ranges from co-location to hyperscale, so we can pretty much facilitate any customer need. So this data centre in Dagenham, which I'm sitting in at the moment, this represents our newest data centre to the market. It's probably the largest data centre that we've got, and it probably represents the sort of new requirements for space and power to support the current trend for machine learning and AI racks. So yeah, that's pretty much NTT. I mean, the great thing we've got, obviously, we can support, as I say, most enterprise customer needs. We've got connectivity to our sites. We've got Metro Connect between our sites, which ensures we're well connected. And obviously, because of its proximity to the Docklands area, again, we're well connected to the Docklands sites and the exchanges there. Yeah, that's pretty much it, I think. Well, I'm sure there's more, but I'm sure you're going to ask me questions on that.
Yeah, I'm sure we'll get into a bit more detail on some of that. And John, if I can come to you for your thoughts on kind of the development of the London area. Obviously, a lot of the coverage of London as a data center hub has been focused on lack of power. But how is London, I suppose, continuing to cement itself as a key player in the European and global data center markets?
Yeah, I mean, I'd say, despite the power constraints, London remains a leading data center hub in, both Europe and the globe, thanks to its scale, connectivity, government support, geographic flexibility, and unprecedented private investment. Those fundamentals of it's a gateway to Europe and the US for latency-sensitive applications, in part due to proximity to subsea cables and transatlantic and pan-European fiber networks. It's got a very established DC ecosystem and dense network connectivity. We continue to see all demand from all major cloud providers. We anticipate AI and HPC workloads to accelerate the need for scalable high density DCs. The UK as a whole is a very stable legal and financial system. And London, being in close proximity to key industries such as the financial and tech markets. I think in terms of London and the UK, there's some planning reform and grid reform that are assisting the DC market. Probably would have seen last year, DCs are designated as critical national infrastructure, which prioritizes investment and given elevated status in planning considerations. And also in the national planning policy framework reforms, there's some new provisions to allow data centers to be built on the Grey Belt, provided they meet sustainability and locational criteria. And also, you can opt into the National Significant Infrastructure Projects regime now, which allows planning decisions to be made by the Secretary of State rather than local authorities. And just in terms of that grid connection process, I think everyone will be fully aware of the NESO reforms currently in progress. which are trying to address the long-standing bottlenecks and accelerate deployment. So instead of being a first come first served model, we're now looking at a first ready and needed and first connected. So prioritizing projects that are strategically aligned, which DCs are, and are ready to go. So you have to be a certain level of progression of land rights and through the planning regime.
Yeah. And I had originally sort of posed this as a question to you, Tom, but obviously you will have, thoughts on the, the M25 corridor as a location as well. But, as well as your data center in Dagenham, NTT Global Data Centers has facilities in Slough and Hemel Hempstead. What makes these locations prime areas for serving kind of, both the London and the UK market?
Well, I think the sites like Slough, the areas like Slough and Hemel are certainly more traditional markets. They're dictated by the fibre routes, and those are the historical areas where you tended to find where most of your data centres were. That in the Docklands area, but like we've sort of alluded to earlier on, is with the space and the power restraints that we're finding, because it's getting more and more congested in those areas, we're obviously having to look further afield, and that's why we're looking to areas like Dagenham, so to develop, and yeah, as I say, strategically it's still a great location because it is well connected now, and it's got the power and it's got the space.
Yeah. Did you have anything you'd like to add to that as well, John?
Yeah, I think moving forward, due to some land and power constraints, you will see operators such as ourselves looking outside those traditional core DC clusters and availability zones. We took a view several years ago on that basis, and purchased in Dagenham, and that's been a great acquisition for us, and we're seeing further demand in the East and North London locations.
Great, thank you. I want to move us forward a little bit to talk around some of the power and the cooling of the facilities. So, Tom, tell me a little bit more about the power mix. What's the maximum IT load you can support sort of throughout your London facilities?
So at the moment we're at 32 megawatts IT load, pretty much, but the plan is for expansion to double that. So we've just completed the first build, the first site here, which we call Lund-1A, and as I said, there's 32 megawatts the IT load. We're currently in construction of the second building here, we call that Lund-1B, and that will provide us with a further 32 megawatts the IT load. So again, quite a large site in scale, and as far as power, we have our own substation here. We've got diverse feeds coming in on the power infrastructure. We manage our network on site with our own teams. So we've got quite a bit of IT space as a result.
Yeah. And what is the power mix like in your facilities in sort of Slough, Dagenham, and Hemel?
So generally, so are you talking about the purchasing power or the tariffs or energy wise? We tend to our demand is for like greener tariffs, and renewable energies sources. So I think the whole industry as a whole, but particularly NTT, there is this demand on the infrastructure and the energy industry to provide the renewable options. So generally our contracts are for renewable energy. So we, as I say, we've got two incomers here, which gives us a diversity. So if we've any issues in the grid, we've got that resilience, and then obviously on site we've got generators which act as backup power. Again, from a renewable point of view, we're looking at most of the generators traditionally would be ran on diesel fuel, but we're seeing a transfer to HVO again from the renewable point of view, and we're in the process of doing that across our sites. Okay.
Great, thank you. And do you use a combination of air or liquid cooling or both at the moment?
So as far as cooling to the halls, yeah, I mean at the moment it's I think Lund-1A predominantly relies upon adiabatic cooling systems. Yes, so the advantages of these is they they rely upon we don't require as much energy to cool these suites. Yeah, so we talk about PUE, power unit efficiency. So obviously, having adiabatic systems means that we can have a lower PUE. So more of the power goes into power in the racks rather than the support around that. So LUN1, because of its high reliance on adiabatic cooling systems, it has got very low PUE. It does mean the other side of that is we use a lot of water to cool our systems, so there still has to be that emphasis on, not how much water we use, water conservation. So we record our WUE, and we look to manage that to the best of our abilities, so only use the water we require, cycle around the systems as many times as possible, and get the best use out of the water that we can.
Yeah, absolutely. And do you perhaps see yourselves kind of moving to new forms of cooling in the future as workload densities change?
So we are looking at validation studies at the moment, even on our LUN1 on liquid cooling to the racks. So we've got adiabatic cooling systems that provide the. So basically, at the moment, the majority is water and air cooling the systems, but we're looking at that adaptation of our systems to provide liquid cooling to the rack, and we're at an advanced stage to design that. It's a system we've used elsewhere at some of our sites in America and in India, and I think there's every possibility you're going to see that rolled out in the London area very shortly.
Great, thank you. And then John, if I could turn it to you, obviously we're reading a lot at the moment in the market about, retrofit for liquid cooling and things like that. So I suppose how much new build out, but also, retrofit are you seeing in kind of London and the M25 corridor at the moment?
Yeah, I think to just put London in context, there's a current supply of a 1.1 gigawatt IT load in London. It's the largest DC market in Europe. We're estimating over 150 megawatt additional capacity to be added this year, and over half a gigawatt over the next 3 years, which is substantial figures. We're actively developing our new London 2 site, which is North London, which hopefully everyone's seen in the press. All our new developments are designed for the evolving needs of AI, cloud, and high density workloads. But to your point on retrofit, alongside our new builds, we are continually working on enhancing our existing sites to deploy advanced cooling and integrating renewable energy sources.
Brilliant, thank you. I want to move us forward to talk around the resiliency and also the scalability of the facilities. So, Tom, how are your kind of on-site substations and backup generators, as you've already mentioned, improving the resiliency of your facilities?
Yeah, so we've got diverse feeds coming in off the grid. Then we manage the 11 kV network across the site. We've obviously got backup generation. We use different methods of supporting our customers. Sometimes we use distributed redundancy or sometimes failover, but ultimately it would generally be a N+1 on the power streams, and each of the power streams would have backup generators and potentially UPS, depending on customer requirements. Yeah. So obviously, the UPS would be there to, in the event of an outage, an unexpected outage, and then, but at the time that it takes the generators to run up, the UPS would hold the load. As I say, this is customer dependent. Not all of our halls have that, and it would be down to customer requirements. There's some you mentioned high density here. So yeah, some of the racks that were supporting upwards of, well upwards of 20, 30, maybe even 40 kilowatts we could support. So yeah, that's pretty much it.
Yeah, and in terms of that, what are you seeing in terms of, I suppose, in your facilities in terms of kilowatt per rack? Are there any plans to scale up power delivery or anything like that to any of the sites due to these heavy workloads that we're
yeah,
seeing?
yeah. We're definitely seeing a trend towards higher density equipment and the racks drawing more power, and this is again along the trend of moving towards the machine learning or the AI racks. They tend to demand a lot of power, and the power can fluctuate up and down quite it's quite dynamic sometimes. So we obviously need to have a lot of power and a lot of cooling for those, or the capability to cool.
Yeah, yeah. And John, what are you seeing at the moment in the London market in terms of denser workloads, the need for existing facilities to scale, and AI workloads at the moment?
Yeah, I think we're seeing London experience a surge in AI-ready and high-density deployments. You put this demand driven by the hyperscale demand for compute-intensive workloads. You've got enterprises migrating to hybrid cloud architectures. I think, as I've previously discussed, the UK planning a good reforms and initiatives like the AI growth zones are helping to accelerate the infrastructure investment needed to capture this demand. And NTT GDC, we're actively scaling our footprint to meet this demand.
Brilliant, thank you. Moving a little bit more into to talk around the sustainability of the facilities. So, Tom, are you able to give me a bit of an overview of the sustainability initiatives at your London facilities? For example, what PUE have you achieved?
So, I mean, PUE, as everybody knows, is heavily dependent upon load, and then from that, it's obviously how you manage that. So, things like just closing off, blanking out hacks. That's where it starts, and then ensuring that you've got. We use a combination of water and air, so a big part of our energy usage would be on fan speed. So it's ensuring that we've got minimum fan speed required to allow us to cool that area. So that's about everything's sensor controlled in our site. So it's ensuring that those systems are working adequately to ensure that the fan speed runs to as low as possible, therefore drawing less energy. So it's continually. I think it's a kind of continued work in progress. Energy initiatives and what we look at to do. So one of our sites at the moment, we're looking at battery storage, exporting back to the grid, for example. But yeah, it's in high peak periods. How we deal with that. So yeah.
And how have you used systems such as BMS to enable efficient cooling and sort of more efficient running?
So again, everything might feed back to the BMS. So generally we've done in pressures and temperatures. So we're looking to maintain set pressures in the halls. So obviously the sensors report back to the BMS, and then that will give us data on, if we can tweak it so that we can reduce that fan speed or increase that supply air temperature, because just a couple of points here degrees can be hundreds of £1,000s worth of savings. So it's just about optimizing using the BMS, the data it provides to optimize your systems to get the best performance out of it.
Yeah. And what about, for example, water usage? You touched on that briefly earlier, but, how are you reducing water usage in your facilities?
Yeah, so, like we said earlier, our cooling systems are adiabatic. The advantage of them is that obviously they help drive down your power unit, your PUE. However, they use a lot of water. So how do we conserve water? So one of the ways we do it is at London and in our Hempstead site is we have reverse osmosis plant. So what that does is it strips, if you like, the impurities out of the water. So it allows us to utilize that water more times. So rather than, because what happens when you utilize the water and you get the evaporation, then you get a higher concentration of particles or saline content, for example, and this can cause problems within our cooling systems and make them work inefficiently and give ourselves bacterial issues perhaps that we really need to manage. So whereas normally you might dump that every 2 times it goes around the system, with the reverse osmosis plant, that allows us to utilize that maybe 10 times. So additionally as well, it means that the interior, if you like, of the pipework network is better maintained and more efficient again. So really reverse osmosis is really important for us, and to ensure that the quality of the water that we're providing to the cooling systems.
Yeah, absolutely. And on that, I'd like to introduce this short video, which will be about reverse osmosis at the Hemel Hempstead 3 facility. Okay, so the video is played, so I'm going to count myself back in. So 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Thank you. And following on from kind of what you've just shared, Tom, I mean, do you have any sort of future plans to improve the sustainability of your facilities?
So I think the next one for us is probably bleed recovery. So reutilising the water. So once we do dump it, if we can then treat it and then feed it back into the system, then we can become more and more self-sufficient, so to speak, and rely less upon the incoming water mains. So that would be probably one that we need to do. But yeah, I think there's always projects and ideas that people are working on to kind of fully utilise and cut down on our water usage.
Yeah, and John touched on it earlier with kind of the connectivity of the strong connectivity of the London market. But are you able to tell me a little bit more about sort of the connectivity of your London facilities?
So we have the Metro Connect. We connected to obviously our Hemel sites and Slough sites. So they've been we've got diverse routes to them. But again, also logistically, we're not far from Dockland sites and Harbour Exchange, etc., the exchange sites. So we're well connected, basically, to the London area. So strategically, Dagenham works for us from a connectivity point of view.
Yeah. And John, if I can turn it to you as well, how is London well positioned to support workloads that rely on latency, particularly as we might see training move to inference? And how is this encouraging further development?
Yeah, I mean, if I mention NTT's footprint first, I mean, in terms of our London facilities, including Dagenham, Hemel Hempstead already mentioned, they're engineered to support ultra low latency workloads. We're in a well position to support those latency sensitive workloads due to strategic location, advanced optical networking, and the comprehensive connectivity ecosystem. I think London-wide, as I mentioned previously, there's the proximity to the transatlantic and Eurofiber routes, with a very dense network ecosystem. Location-wise, London, there's a lot of finance and tech hubs. You've mentioned AI inference there. There's definitely an item to mention there, which is pushing operators to build specialized low latency infrastructure. And if you look at post-Brexit, local data processing requirements encouraging hyperscalers to build UK-based low latency zones for compliance and performance. So all encouraging further development in the region.
Yeah, and you've teed me up quite nicely, actually. I'd like to just spend a little bit of time looking at the development of the London data center market generally. So, yeah, John, I think you may have touched on this earlier, but how many megawatts of development do you currently see in the pipeline coming in the London region?
Yeah, I mean, as NTT, we've got a committed pipeline to expand to over 120 megawatts, and that's building our existing footprint of 7 facilities across Dagenham, Slough, and Hemel Hempstead. As I mentioned before, we've got a London 2 development in progress, which is North London. I think it's about 26 acres. if you look at the London market in general, just to, I guess, re-emphasize some of the figures I mentioned before, we'd estimate 150 megawatts this year, and over 500 gigawatts over the next 3 years.
Yeah, and I suppose despite the grid constraints that we're seeing at the moment, how can London continue to establish itself as, a global leader in the data center market?
Yeah, I guess to a couple of my points earlier on, we definitely do need to build upon and push, the grid reform system, and push the planning reform system. They're good starts, but I think you need to push them along, and further work to be done. I think there are land and grid constraints in the traditional DC clusters and availability zones, and I think we'll see a continued movement to expand to the outer reaches of those zones. So to your point earlier on, you'll see multiple developments around the M25 corridor. We're certainly looking at one of our London 2 sites, and I think as you said, we're already in Dagenham to the east, and you've got a lot of further development to the north and east of London, and then further out even to the west as well. I think we need to invest in the energy diversification and grid balancing technologies. Certainly, promoting sustainable and scalable infrastructure, with an eye on that AI infrastructure that we discussed previously. And as London, we need to leverage the low latency connectivity in place, to attract those high performance workloads, because the demand is certainly there. And I think something that NTT, we do very well in London and across Europe, is engaging communities proactively to manage, the reputation and foster support. We see headlines on a daily basis, but we can all discuss that for a while. But I think as part of the government and as operators, we need to lead those discussions and manage that reputation and support.
Yeah, absolutely. And do you think that sort of given sort of, as you mentioned, the grid constraints in central London, we'll start to see more build out in those areas kind of surrounding London, as you said, the M25 corridor, Slough, Hemel Hempstead, Hayes, where it's not central London, but there's still excellent connectivity to there.
Yeah, I think it's inevitable. Partly from power constraints. Us and others will be looking at bridging solutions where power isn't available. But from a pure land perspective, there's only a certain amount of land available in Slough, Hayes, and the other key availability zones in West London. So people definitely be looking further afield, all around West, North, and East London. And to your point, they're very well connected. And I think once you start to see a few developments, a lot more follow suit. So I think it will be an exciting time over the next 3 to 5 years on seeing where those DC clusters and availability zones move and migrate to.
Yeah, absolutely. And Tom, you mentioned there. John mentioned there some of the plans for expansion you have, but are you able to tell us a little bit more about your plans for kind of further development in London and the UK?
So at London, in Dagenham area, we've got a second site that we're in construction at the moment. So that's due probably 27 for completion. So that's that construction phase. So so that's in development. And as I said, as John said, we've also got land banked on the north side of the M25. So we've got plans in place to expand our current. And then, to be honest, the demand has been pretty intense for Dagenham, I would say. So the market is definitely there. So we really can't build fast enough, I would suggest.
Yeah, absolutely. And going back to something that you said, John, sort of around, just the amount of expansion that we're seeing at the moment, how can data centers continue to work with those kind of, local communities and kind of increase awarenesses of what data centers are doing as we kind of build out in new areas and new regions?
Yeah, I think it's a combination of working both with government. We certainly speak to, the relevant bodies, as operators, and we speak to our DC operators, and then engage definitely with the local community. So we, wherever we go in London and Europe, we always put the community top of the agenda, to help educate them on what these facilities are, what they look like, and we really actively encourage and organise events where the local population can come and visit the DCs and see what's actually inside them, because it's always a very interesting experience for those that haven't, to see actually what goes on inside those things, and essentially that's the internet and the cloud in there. So yeah, it's always very much on top of our agenda to facilitate those visits and put the local community at the top of our agenda when we're developing.
Yeah, absolutely. Brilliant. So we've got just a couple of minutes left. So I'd like to go to you both just for some final thoughts and kind of key takeaways, if that's all right. So yeah, Tom, if I can maybe go to you first. Anything at the, I suppose, what do you find kind of most exciting about your kind of London facilities and your plans for growth, and anything you would like to leave our audience with?
Yeah, I mean, it's such a vibrant industry just now. Yeah, so I mean, every day at the moment is, I'm heavily involved in the transfer at the moment from construction to operations, and just it's just, you're learning every day, so every day is a new learning day. So that's part of it. I'm enjoying that. It's a challenge every day. It's fast paced. The demands are great. The pace is high. So it's very rewarding, I feel, when you get customers on board and you get satisfaction from your customer. Yeah, and also just promoting the industry. You mentioned, John, earlier on about the way we educate the local community. We do actually this week. We've got the local college on site, and they're just over in another building from where I'm sitting just now, and that's part of it. We should show them the data center, educate them on how these things work. Try to break that myth of, yes, we use a lot of energy, but we're also driving the demands for renewable energies, which is it's going to be part of this transition of the energy usage in this country, and I think data centers are front and center of that. So yeah, so all of the above, and just the people that I work with as well. There's a great, everybody's, I think, very committed and very driven, and very motivated, and that's enjoyable to be part of.
Yeah, that's great. And John, any kind of final thoughts and key takeaways from you as well around sort of the future of the London data center market?
Yeah, I mean, as Tom said there, it's a very exciting time to be, in the industry. It has its challenges, but there's so much demand coming to the market. Certainly as NTT, we're going to continue to grow our presence to support the future digital infrastructure needs in this evolving market. I think it's a great time, to have those discussions, as I mentioned earlier on, with operators, municipalities, governments, and the local people on the ground. And I think there's going to be some very exciting developments in the London market over the next 3 to 5 years plus. So yeah, really exciting time to be in the industry and London specifically.
Yeah, absolutely. A great note to end on. Well, unfortunately, Tom and John, I'll have to wrap it up there. But it was a pleasure speaking with you both, and hope you've enjoyed the discussion as much as I have. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much, of course, to NTT Global Data Centers for partnering with us on this episode. If you would like any further reading, please do check out the resources below, and please do send in any questions, and get in touch with John and Tom if you'd like to hear more. I'm sure they'd be happy to hear from you. This episode will be available on demand shortly, so you can share it with anyone who may have missed it. And the next episode will be coming up in just a few minutes at the top of the hour. But until then, thank you very much to Tom and John for joining me, and to NTT Global Data Centers for partnering with us. And we hope to see you again soon. Thank you.